In 1932, Australia fought a war that no history book could make up. A war not against a rival nation or rebels, not even against nature itself in the form of rain or fire. No, this was a war against birds. And not just any birds. These were emus, the giant flightless runners of the Australian outback. And you will be surprised of what happened next. The story begins in Western Australia, just after World War I. Soldiers had returned home to a country still reeling from the Great Depression. Many of these men were given land to farm, especially in the wide, dry fields of Western Australia. The government thought this would help soldiers rebuild their lives while also increasing wheat production for the struggling economy. But there was a problem. Actually, several problems. The soil wasn't great, the money wasn't enough, and on top of that, the land was already home to thousands upon thousands of emus. Now emus look like goofy overgrown chickens, but don't be fooled. These birds can grow up to 2 meters tall and run as fast as a horse. To the farmers, they weren't just a nuisance, they were a plague. The birds discovered that freshly planted wheat fields were basically all-you-can-eat buffets, and when 30 to 50,000 emus began migrating inland after breeding season, they stormed the farmland like no tomorrow. They trampled fences, devoured crops, and left the farmers hopeless. The farmers had a simple request: help us deal with the emus. They turned to the government, and the government turned to the military. And that is where things took a bizarre turn. The Australian Minister of Defence, Sir George Pearce, approved a military operation, not a culling, not a hunting drive, but a literal deployment of soldiers with machine guns. The war against the emus was officially on. In November 1932, Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery, along with his men, set out into the bush armed with 2 machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The goal was simple: cut down the emu population and save the wheat. What happened next, however, was anything but simple. The first encounter came quickly. A flock of about 50 emus was spotted. The soldiers set up their guns, took aim, and opened fire. The birds scattered instantly. Despite the rattling gunfire, only a few emus went down. The rest sprinted off in every direction, running too fast and too erratically for the gunners to track. A few days later, the soldiers found a much larger group, about 1,000 emus. This was the perfect chance. They set up their guns again, waited until the birds were in range, and fired. But just as the bullets started flying, the gun jammed. The flock dashed away, barely touched, leaving behind dust and embarrassment. Time after time, the soldiers tried to take out the emus, and time after time, the birds outran, outmaneuvered, and outright mocked the mighty Australian military. The machine guns were heavy and hard to move, while the emus seemed to have developed battlefield tactics. They traveled in smaller groups, split up when attacked, and used their speed to scatter. Major Meredith himself admitted that the emus had a surprising ability to dodge and survive. He even joked that if the army ever faced actual enemies with the same fighting spirit as the emus, Australia would be in real trouble. Over the course of weeks, the soldiers fired thousands of rounds. The official count of confirmed emu casualties was barely a few hundred. To make matters worse, heavy rain came and spread the emus out even more, making them nearly impossible to corner. Farmers mocked the soldiers, newspapers had a field day, and the so-called Great Emu War was turning into a national embarrassment. By December, the government decided enough was enough. The military was pulled out, and the emus declared the undisputed champions of the battlefield. The farmers were furious, their crops were still being destroyed, and the soldiers returned home with their tails between their legs. But the story didn't end there. In the years after, the government looked for other solutions. They eventually put bounties on emus, encouraging civilians to hunt them. Fences were reinforced, and slowly the farmers managed to gain some control over the situation. But the memory of 1932 remained. To this day, the Emu War is remembered as one of the strangest military operations in history, a time when a modern army lost a war to birds. The legacy of the Emu War is more than just a funny headline. It's a story about underestimating nature, about the absurdity of bureaucracy, and about how even the best laid plans can collapse in the dust of the outback. For the people who lived through it, it was frustrating and humiliating. For the rest of us, it's a tale so ridiculous it's hard to believe it really happened. Only in Australia. Alright, I guess that is it for today's video. I really had a blast reading about the emus against the Australian army. It was just ridiculous. If there's anything you'd like me to cover next, please let me know in the comments down below. Without any further ado, thank you so much for watching, thank you for subscribing, and I will see you next time. Bye.